Hi there, thanks for joining. In this video we're gonna take a look at warm and cool colors, but not only just in theory, but also right on the palette. With the same temperature in an orange room, you are likely to feel a little bit more warm than with the same temperature in a blue colored room. In general, people say that colors on this side of the color wheel are the more warmer colors, and colors on this side of the color wheel are the more cooler colors. So you could say that colors with yellow and red in it are more warm and colors with blue in it are more cool. And some theories claim that this has to do with our association with colors. So for instance, red and yellow we associate it maybe with fire, and blue for instance with ice, water, sky, that sort of things. So two things, I think there are some colors that generally speaking people agree that they are warm or cool, but most other colors are more in a gray area, so that is subjective. And another thing, and that's even more important, let's say that we say that this is a warm color, but it can be the coolest color when it is surrounded by other warmer colors. So let's examine that more closely, because it's fun, that's one thing, but the other thing is everything we look at helps understanding color theory and helps increasing your perception of colors, but also color mixing itself. So there we have green, here we have red. Now, and if I compare the two, I would say yes, green looks a little bit cooler to me than red. It's relative. The green looks cool because of the red next to it. But now everything looks different, suddenly. Because when I compare this same green with this blue, then I say, this green looks a little bit warm. But it is compared to this blue, of course. So you see, the whole thing about cutting the color wheel in two and saying that this part is cool and this part is warm, it's all relative. Because these two colors belong to the cool side of the color wheel, and this one certainly is cooler than this one. Now, of course, we could theorize, why does this green feel warmer than this blue? And then you could say, well, that is because it contains blue, but also yellow. And yellow is considered a warmer color, of course. So you see, that green contained blue and yellow. So if I make a whole collection of cool colors, one of those cool colors always will be the warmest, and another color will always be the coolest. And there's always that relationship between the colors. And the same goes for warm colors, of course. If I have a collection of warm colors, one color will stand out more, will feel more warm than the rest. Now there is one thing that is handy with the division of the color wheel in two parts, because generally speaking the colors that are marked cool on this side of the color wheel are colors that tend to recede a little bit to the background, and they don't scream for attention. And on the other hand, these colors that we in general call warm colors, they are more attention grabbing. So they come more towards us, and the cool colors tend to recede more. For instance, here in this painting you see that as well. Blue recedes to the background, the sky color, and then we have the warm color of the house and the street. Those colors are more orangey, you could say, and therefore these colors come forward, pop out more. They grab the attention more. I bought a blue jacket, but still it feels very warm. And then a lot of times people can say a color can be rather neutral, or it can have a tendency towards more cool, or a tendency to more warm. But in my opinion, a way better way to look at these things is looking in terms of color biases. Let's take a look at this green, for instance. We could say this is a rather kind of neutral green. And if we add, and on the color wheel we see that next to green on the one side you have yellow. So you can have greens that lean towards yellow, then you get a yellowish kind of green, like this. And on the other side they can lean, green leans towards blue. So you can have greens that lean more towards blue. And of course there are all kinds of gradations in this. You get the idea. Now you could say that this is a neutral green and this looks a little bit warmer and this looks a little bit cooler. You could say that. But in this case already, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. Personally, but it also can be my perception. But personally, the difference between the warmth of this and this, I think is rather close. And on the other hand, the differences in warm and cool here are rather big. So already in this case, I say, it isn't that obvious to me. Huh? When I take a look at red, for instance, rather neutral kind of red. Now, red can have a bias towards purple. Now, in my opinion, this red looks cooler than this one. Yeah? Makes a little bit of sense because we've added blue, of course. Now the other way, if I add a little bit of yellow, because on the other side red leans towards orange, and if I add a little bit of yellow, then I say, it isn't that obvious to me. But especially this is cooler than the red in the center. But is this very practical to think in ways of warmer and cooler? I don't think so. I think it's more practical to think about these colors as this is a rather neutral red, this is a red leaning towards orange. Well, it is a little bit too orangey now, but you understand what I mean. So if I add slightly more red, then you see what I mean. This is a red with a tendency towards orange. And this one I have exaggerated as well a bit, so I can make it slightly less exaggerated. So like this, you see? Now it is a red with a bias towards purple. So I think it's easier to call it that way. And with the greens it's the same story. So here we have a rather neutral green, and here I see a green with a yellow bias, and here I see a green with a blue bias. Why not just call it that way? And I think it's even better to think of it that way, because in general, when you're painting from real life, you look at a color and you try and you wonder, is the color that I see, is that a rather neutral green, or is it more a yellowish kind of green, or is it more a blue kind of green? It makes less sense to start thinking about, is this a warm green or a cool green? That doesn't really make much sense to me. So, and it is not to say that thinking in warm and cool terms is wrong, because I know when you're painting, you're doing things intuitively as well, and I sometimes have these feelings of warm and cool as well. And sometimes I even say that if I have a green color, and then sometimes I just say, oh, I need to cool it down a bit. Most of the times when you want to cool down colors, you add blue. And when you want to make colors warmer, most of the times you add either yellow or red or orange. So, and by the way, to cool down colors you can also use white, because white also cools down colors. I can show you. Now, green can be a very clear example. A little bit of green. And I add a touch of white. And see what happens? It instantly feels cooler than that one. But I would say, there's another way to call this. I would say it is slightly less saturated than this one. That's another way to look at it. Now let's look at another gray area. I put two blue colors on my palette. This is one. And this is two. Now, in dark form it is really hard to see a difference. This one looks a little bit more purplish than this one. I don't even know if you can see that on the camera. But if I add a little bit of white, you can more clearly see. So I add a little bit of white to lighten up this color, and then you see ultramarine blue has a slight bias towards purple. And now the other one is phthalo blue, and I add a little bit of white to phthalo blue. And phthalo blue, with most brands, it depends a bit on the brand that you use, but with this brand it is a rather neutral kind of blue, slightly towards yellow. So now the question is, which one is warmer? If we look at it that way for now. We want to explore the gray areas. And most people would say that this is a warmer blue, and for me personally, so I might be strange. This always feels a little bit warmer, but in this case, this blue, in theory, contains a little bit of magenta, so it's a little bit towards the red side. This one is neutral and a little bit towards the yellow side. But yeah, that's a gray area. What is warmer, with a little bit of yellow in it or with a little bit of red in it? I don't know, and to be honest, I cannot judge it that well. So this for me feels warmer, but it might very well be that for you this feels warmer. So that's a bit subjective as well, I think. And it also, again, it doesn't really matter that much in my opinion. Because again, if I look at the sky color or at the color of water, then I just start looking at the blues and I think, is this a more neutral blue, or is it a blue that leans a little bit towards magenta, so a little bit purplish blue, or is it a bit greenish blue? And so I just look at the bias of the color. And there are a lot of gray areas. Same goes for, in my opinion, this. This is an orangey yellow. This is orange. And this is more red-orange. You see? On the scale. Now, I think for some people maybe this is the warmest color, but for some people maybe that one, and for some people maybe that one. I don't really know, to be honest. Little bit too warm. But now it's confession time, because there are situations, especially with gray colors, that I personally often do look in terms of warmer and cooler. Because with grays it's a little bit more obvious to me, because gray, a neutral gray, is a very neutral kind of color. That's also when I want to turn on the cameras, I first do a white balance setup with this neutral gray thing. Then I can teach the camera, so to speak, what is neutral gray in this situation with this light, and then the camera adjusts itself to this neutral gray, so it shows the colors correctly, or more or less correctly. So I already showed this example. You could say this is a bit brownish kind of color, but I see it as a kind of a gray color. It's a gray version of orange. So in that case I can mix a gray color, let's say maybe with a color like this, for instance, as a base, and make it slightly warmer again. There you have it, I said warmer, by adding a little bit of red and orange, red or orange or yellow. So it's always the case. I really don't like to say in art with certain things that everything needs to be done in one way, or that warm or cool is always the correct way, or it is never the correct way. That just doesn't exist. Warm and cool, it is, I think it's no coincidence that people talk about it, so there has to be something in it. When I see this color, I feel that it is warm, even in isolated form on its own. By the way, I do see that blue on my finger is a little bit cooler than my finger itself. But there are so many gray areas, and that's what this video is about. Talking about gray areas, that's just what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna make a gray out of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. That's my favorite way of making grays. So, ultramarine, burnt umber, I get a dark mixture. So I also use it for blacks a lot of the times. And now I add a little bit of white so that we can see what kind of gray do I have here. With a base gray of this, built out of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, I can easily adjust it towards more warm, as I call it then, when I add a little bit of extra brown, or burnt umber in this case, so a brown color, then I definitely see that this gray gets warmer than this one. The other way around, if I balance it with more blue, so ultramarine in this case, you see I definitely get a cooler gray. So with grays I do tend to think in warmer and cooler, and also when I compare it to the source photograph or real life, then I can easily judge does my gray need to be a little bit warmer or cooler? That's something I can clearly see often. But you could also just as well say in this case, the gray in the photograph has a bias towards orange or towards red or towards yellow or towards blue or towards green. So it is, you see, it is a little bit silly, but that's how it is. So in another instant, maybe you need to make the gray warmer, you need to add a little bit more an orangey kind of color. That can also be possible. So like this. So this is also, this I see is a little bit warmer than this, I think. There you go again. But again, that is all relative. And also, if you think that this video is cool, hit that like button, that makes me feel warm. Luckily my trousers have air conditioning. But now just let's drop that thing of warm and cool. Let's look at it the other way, the way that I teach most of the times. And when I look at colors, I look at three things. I look at the hue, the color family, the global color family. Then I look at the tonal value of the color, how light or dark is it. And the other thing is the saturation. How vivid is the color? And if you look at these three things, then you look at colors in a whole different way and you can just match any color that you see. And of course it takes maybe a little bit of practice depending on your experience in painting. But let's take a look. Let's see if I have a photograph somewhere around here. Okay, so here I've got the photograph and I just tear some parts, sorry sir, to do a little bit of color mixing. I'll do two sample colors. So, here we see a blue color. I don't know. Now you already know that this is blue. Oei, 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 spoiler alert. And this kind of color I won't tell. So we're gonna mix a color like this and a color like this. Now, we could look warm, cold. Okay, blue. You see again in the photograph it recedes to the background. So, and it is cooler than this. That's the way we see in comparison. But I don't care about that. I just want to mix this color, that blue color. How do I do that? The first question can be, what color does this look like? Is it red, orange? The colors on the color wheel, which color family? Now, I think most of us agree that it is blue. So I grab a little bit of cyan in this case. Then I start wondering how light or dark is this color? Is it, and especially when you paint from photographs, look at this, I just put it on the back side of my palette knife, I hold it in front of the photograph, and so I look at the tonal value, and that is how light or dark is the color. Is my color darker or lighter than what I see? It's definitely darker. So, how can I make it lighter? Most colors you can make lighter with white, some colors you can make lighter with yellow, and some colors you can make lighter with yellow and white. Because yellow is a light color, but if I add yellow to blue, then it becomes green. But let me first add a little bit of white. And then it's a balancing act. So if I add more white, it gets lighter, of course. If I add more blue, it gets darker again. You see, I'm still too dark in tonal value. So I'm gonna add more white. Maybe now I've added a little bit too much. Here's a little bit of blue still, so let's take that and mix that. I'm still slightly too dark. Now, and when you match the tonal value, it can very well be that you see that there's something else lacking to your color. You see, I'm getting close. Still, it needs a little bit of white. So that's the thing that you do if you're new to painting. Maybe you still have to learn this, but color mixing is an important part of painting. And it is color matching, in fact. So you try to match the color that you see. And you don't have to match every tiny dot that you see, but in general. So now I'm quite good with my tonal value, you see, but I can see I'm not quite there yet. Now, I'm just gonna try. I think my color first off, it can use a little bit of magenta to make it slightly more biased towards purple. Let me just try. I add a little touch of magenta and I'm gonna look what happens. So I change the bias a little bit of the color, because now it gets more towards a purplish kind of color. And now I say, ooh, we're almost there, you see? So my color is almost the same tonal value, and it is almost the same color as well, but it is still slightly too vivid. Now, up till now, this color consists of phthalo blue, and phthalo blue is a primary color, with white, and I've added magenta. So up till now, this color contains only two primaries. I want to dull it down, then I need to add a third primary, because whenever I add a third primary to a color, I'm gonna destroy it. I'm gonna make it more gray. So I take a little touch of yellow and I'm gonna add this to this mixture, because if I add too much yellow, it becomes green. So I have to be very careful. Maybe this is already a little bit too much. We're gonna see. Might be that I've added too much. You see? It's sometimes very tricky, of course. Yes, now it's way too green, you see? No problem at all. Then I add slightly more of the magenta again. And of the cyan. So I'm gonna restore it a little bit. Now it's a little bit still, it lacks a little bit of magenta. It can lean a little bit more towards the purple side still. There we go. And now, yes. And now you see, now we're spot on. I hope you can see, but that is the game. So, in all of this process, did I one time think about warm and cool? No, to be honest. I only thought about color family, color bias, and because one thing is the color family, blue, but what kind of blue? Is it a greenish kind of blue or a purplish kind of blue? So I've established that, and I've looked at the tonal value, and I've looked at the saturation. Ugh, this coffee is way too cold. Last color that I do, because I've made already a lot of videos about this, but I think in a way you can never show it too many times. Which colors shall we do? I tear this off because then I have more room. So you see, let's do this general kind of color. Ah, that's more difficult. Yes, we like that. I'm not quite sure which color family it is, to be honest, but how can I explore that? Well, by just trying. What colors do I think that are absolutely in this mixture? So I would say it absolutely has yellow and red in it, orange, so to speak. And that's something I can think that might be the case, but of course it won't be a vivid orange. It's not orange. So, and I also don't know the bias, so I just mix an orange color. That's my first step. And then I know nothing at this stage. I think I keep it a little bit towards the red-orange side, because I think it has a little bit a kind of pinkish kind of feel to it. I don't know for sure, but if I add white to this, it might be that it gets a little bit pink, especially when I add more red. Shall we try? Let's try. So I add a little bit of white, because it is way too vivid, and therefore also, and the tonal value is slightly too dark. So I add a little bit of white. Let's see. And immediately you see that it gets a little bit less vivid, and I'm gonna compare. It's still a little bit too dark as well. Okay, so I'm gonna add more white. So if you cannot see clearly what you are doing, just alter one of the three things that you think at that point in time is most handy to do. At this stage I want to get close to the tonal value, because then maybe I can better see what is lacking. So here we are closer to the tonal value. I think the color isn't really that bad, but it doesn't look similar because my color is very vivid. And the color on the photograph is way more gray. So at this stage, I'm still not quite sure if this needs more red or more yellow, but I do see that I want to alter the vividness. So in this case, I've mixed yellow and red, two primaries. I want to add a little bit of the third primary, cyan. So let me do that. Let's do that. And of course, it also alters that way the tonal value sometimes. So that's the case. You see, now it gets duller, the color. It gets more gray. I'm gonna compare again. And then I say, ooh, we're rather close all of a sudden. So you see, with these very small adjustments, it was ever so slight an adjustment, and still we're already getting close. But now I think my color, it needs to be a little touch lighter, and it needs a slight touch extra red. You see? That's what I think. Or magenta. So I add a little bit of white still. Oh, maybe too much, but let's take a look. You see, that's a little bit close. Oh, that's not that bad, but now it lacks a little bit of red, I think. So I take a tiny touch of red, especially because I'm mixing a very tiny amount of paint now. That alters the tonal value again as well, of course. But look at that. We're very, very close to that color there in between. So, and of course, here the color shifts in all kinds of directions, but you get the idea. And did I think again about warm or cool? No, that didn't matter to me. And also, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say as well. A lot of times you hear people say that with warm lights you get cooler shadows, and with cool light you get warmer shadows. And in general, I think you could say that is true. But there are exceptions to this rule. So I think the best way to look at things is just by trying to isolate a color that you see and then try to match that color just by looking at color family, tonal value and saturation. Now if you want to learn more about color matching like I did here, you can watch this video. You can also join me on Patreon. Then you support me directly and you get access to more videos, blogs and exclusive content. Follow the link for more information. Thanks for watching and see you next time.